You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Hey, how are you? Okay, you can probably hear my voice. I am sick. I'm actually on the mend, which is a terrific thing, but y'all, I was down for the count this week. It went through my family so fast. I don't know what it is. It was the flu of some sort. I've been vaccinated twice, I tested negative for COVID, but I don't know if it was a variation of COVID or what, but myself and my kids have been locked in our house for over a week trying to get over this, whatever it is. So I apologize to you if I sound a little weird or if I clear my throat. I will try very hard not to do that. But I wanted to get this out to you because here comes another apology. I am still continuing to take this certification at Stanford on psychology of addiction because you can't, I didn't want to get an extension on my work. I wanted to continue to plow through. So here's my apology. I know some of you are like, Michelle, why do you have to keep mentioning the name Stanford? And here's why. And then I'm going to say it and I won't say it again. But those of you who know me and have been listening for a while understand I have what's now called learning differences. But back in my day, they were just called learning difficulties, learning problems. And I have dyslexia, and I'm sure I have a bunch of other things that weren't officially diagnosed when I was younger, which is ironic because I read and write for a living, but it always takes me about 2 or 3 times longer to learn the information. But here's the good news, is that once I learn it, it's like I get it. And I can explain it in such an easier way because I had to learn kind of tricks and trades or tricks and tools to get to the same destination as other people. So I think that actually helps me become a stronger teacher of what I'm learning. At least that's what my kids tell me. But you guys, for someone who has multiple learning difficulties, to take such a profoundly hard and difficult class at a wonderful institution is something I never would have dreamed I was possible of. And I don't even think my family would ever dream that I could have done this. So I, at the age of 44, am realizing that it's really, really okay to be proud of yourself for certain things in your life. I am not bragging. This is me just being proud of what I'm doing. It's hard work, you guys. It's Sunday. I have spent the entire day. I started at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's now 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't, gotten up working on this, and I'm doing it for you. And I'm just so kind of proud of myself. So I apologize if I am using, my brother already teased me. He's like, Michelle, for God's sake, stop saying that name. And I'm like, no, little brother, I might actually get a tattoo on my forehead. I am considering it, of Stanford, saying I went to Stanford. Yes, it's ridiculous. Of course I won't do that. But anyways, I'm taking this course and I'm passing on this information to you because I think it's really helpful. I'm not going to tell you everything I'm learning because this podcast and this community that we have built is about helping loved ones of people suffering from addiction, not actual people who are suffering from addiction. So the purpose of this is to help you guys understand what's going on with your loved ones. Let's make sense, a little more sense, of why this is happening to them and what you can do about it, what you should expect if they're getting sober, what you should, relapse looks like, what addiction actually means to you and to your family, all those very philosophical questions, like bringing them back down into practical, hopefully basic and very simplistic reasoning. So I am going to talk to you today. What I'm going to teach you today is screening processes. What does that mean? That's just, and this is the thing that I'm learning about academia, is like they use a lot of big words that, I don't know, just feel unnecessary to me. Like, can't we all just speak like normal English language people? But a screening process is basically, okay, this is what healthcare providers can use, and there's multiple tools out there, and we're going to talk about them, to diagnose your loved one with a moderate or severe addiction. And, excuse me, so how does this apply to you? When you sit there and you're like, I think they have a problem. I'm really serious. They're passed out on the couch, or they're hiding alcohol bottles, or they're drinking after work and staying at the bar too late, or even gambling, like there's too much money leaving our bank account, or with pornography, like they can't seem to stop watching pornography even if I've asked them to, or sex addiction, if they can't seem to be sleeping with other people and having affairs, no matter how much I've told them this hurts me. Like, you can be addicted to a lot of things, right? And you sit there as the loved one, particularly at the beginning of your relationship, going, wait a second, this just doesn't feel right. I don't know if this is actual moderation, right? And so let's just take the use of cannabis. 35% of people become addicted to cannabis. So for those of you out there, I know this is going to be very controversial because I get the emails from people saying cannabis is not addictive. It is. It can be addictive for a certain type of person. And 35% of people have a dependency on cannabis. And yes, cannabis scientifically can have negative results. It can increase signs of depression, of anxiety. It can cause lung disease. It can cause paranoia. There are many negative results. So please, if you love someone suffering from addiction and they think that, if I just abstain from, a couple drinks and I stop drinking altogether, but I'm going to get high all the time on a regular basis and consistently, and because it's natural and a plant, you shouldn't have a problem with it. That is something for you to reconsider. I have an argument against that theory. So if you're one of those people and you're going, I think they really do have a problem, and every time I confront them and say, hey, I think this is an issue, like this is costing you your job, you are skipping work, or whatever their substance of choice is, it is causing negative ramifications on your life. It's causing arguments. It's causing them to miss specific events. It's causing you financial problems. Whatever that is, there are screening tools that can help prove that you're right, basically. And not only that, these screening tools that are provided by healthcare providers can actually help diagnose at what stage is your loved one in their addiction. Are they at the beginning stages? Are they in the middle stages? Or are they really needing, severe, they're in severe stages where they would experience withdrawal symptoms. So that's the good news, is that there are screening tools. Now here's the bad news. Are you ready? The bad news, you're like, no, Michelle, I'm not ready. I don't want to hear any bad news. I know. But listen, walk with me because I got you. And because we're in this together, I walked through this with, many times before. And knowing the bad news is not necessarily bad because it's actually helping you become empowered. It's helping you get smarter about addiction so that you're not naive and you're not kind of walking around second guessing yourself, worried about your future, wondering where are you going to be ending up in 5 years? Will this ever get better? Do they actually have a problem? All those really, really valid, very valid worries and concerns and thoughts that you consume your life day in and day out that make loving someone struggling with substance use disorder feel hopeless and helpless, and you're just desperate. Well, getting educated about this stuff like screening and hearing the bad news, that helps you sit there and become empowered because you're now aware of everything. You're aware of what your loved one, slow down. You're aware of the possibility if they can get sober and what does that look like, right? You can take honest inventory of your personal situation and say, yeah, I'm not sure that my loved one really is showing signs of wanting to truly get sober, despite what they're trying to tell me, because they will do their best to try to tell you and convince you they don't have a problem, or they're helpless and they can't get sober, or that I'm doing everything I can to get sober, and if you just changed, I would be able to, right? Like, they do a great job of of arguing back to you all the reasons why they just are unable to attain sobriety long term. And with this information, you can sit there and go, yeah, I don't buy it. I don't believe that because I know better. I'm not listening to this crazy talk. I'm not listening to these lies or manipulations. I am a smart, I'm a smart partner in this. And then you get to make a decision because you have autonomy over your life to say whether, now that you know that they're lying or manipulating you, you can say, I'm going to stay, or I'm going to go, or I'm going to go to therapy and get help, or I'm going to go on that vacation without you, or I'm going to take control over our kids' lives. And guess what? Until you get sober, you don't really get a vote. Like, you need to worry about you. I'm going to change lanes. We're not in the same lane anymore. And I'm going to mind my side of the street, and, good luck to you on getting sober. So that's what that's what learning about this disease is why it's empowering. And it's also being willing to hear the bad news. So let me get back to that. What is the bad news about the screening process? The bad news is that in order to be properly screened, so let's say, for example, you drag your loved one kicking and screaming to an evaluator's office, whether that's in a hospital or it's a therapist who specializes in addiction, right? Which is why, I know I keep going on these tangents and I apologize, but which is why you always have to go to a doctor who specializes in addiction. A marriage counselor is not good enough. You need to find a specialist or a practitioner who really has studied addiction, because there is so much to know about this disease. And going to a well-intentioned marriage family practitioner who doesn't have experience or education or certification in addiction, unfortunately, can just give you bad advice, right? So always please look for a healthcare provider that specializes in addiction when you go out and get your help. So let's say you go and you find somebody, right? And let's say this particular healthcare provider works in a hospital and they specialize in screening people who possibly could be addicted to all sorts of drugs or substances or, gambling, pornography, whatever. So you say, if you don't go to the screening, that's it. We're done. I'm moving out. Okay? And finally, your loved one says, fine, I'll go. And you want them to go so badly that you make them an appointment. You call, you look in, I was about to say you look in your phone book. There is no phone books anymore, Michelle. That is funny. You go on Google, right? And you find a person and you call and you make the appointment and your heart is beating fast and your hopes are high because you think, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to have proof. I'm going to have proof that they have a problem and that they're going to get help and our family's going to be okay and things will work out. Like all I need is a third party to validate what I have been thinking is going on for forever. And my loved one is finally saying yes, they'll go, okay? So you make this appointment. And as those of you who know have taken the Love Over Addiction program, that is kind of error number one. You're doing the work for them by making the appointment. But you don't know any better because you're new to this. And you want so badly to help because you would give your right arm in order to get them sober. There's nothing you would not do to save your family, to save your relationship. So you, with the best intentions and the most loving heart, make this appointment with this specialist, okay? And then the day comes where the evaluation appointment is, let's say, at 2:00 in the afternoon. And you wake up all excited, but also panicky and a little bit worried because, oh my goodness, what if they don't go? What if they back out? Lord knows they've backed out of enough things. They've made promises and broken them so many times before. Is this going to be another fight? Are you going to have to strong arm them into going to this appointment? Probably. And you know a battle is about to begin. So you gear up. You put on your coat of armor. You start thinking in your head, okay, how can I force them to this appointment? And let's say you're successful. Let's say they finally, after whatever amounts of convincing or begging or nagging or threatening you do, they finally get in that car and you think, thank God, we're going to make it to the appointment. You're barely going to make it in time, but you are going to make it. And you drive to this hospital and you get out and you go up to the receptionist and you announce that you're there for the appointment. Because again, you're doing all the work here. You're doing the driving, you're doing the announcing, you're making the appointment, right? But you are dragging them, kicking and screaming because by goodness, you know what's good for them. And getting them sober, if it's going to kill you, you're fine, but you will accomplish your goal. So you get them to the hospital, you announce that you're there for the appointment, and they tell you to wait in the hall. And you sit in one of those plastic seats in the starchy hallways, and you are thinking, thank God we are here. We have made it. I cannot wait to be validated because a professional, maybe in a white coat, is going to sit there and say, you have a problem, you need help. If you don't get better, you're going to lose everything and die, right? Which is very, very sad, but also in some weird, twisted way, a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful announcement that you need to be made because it's not just a battle between you and your loved one anymore. You've got backup. You've got a person saying you were right. You get validated. So the person comes out, the evaluator comes out and says, okay, welcome, come on in. And you have to wait in the hallway. And you wait and you wait and you look at your clock and you pull out your phone and you try to do all the things and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be so good. I hope this is good. This is going to be good, right? This is going to have a good outcome. And then the panic starts to come and you go through the roller coaster ride of what are all the possible outcomes, okay? And then you start to wonder, I wonder what they're doing in there. What actually happens in this evaluation? And then what are they going to suggest? And you might have even been so type A that you brought a notebook and a pen in your purse and you have questions that you want to ask this specialist and you are ready to take notes as to what to do next. What does he or she recommend that we do? This is how good of a human being you are. This is how badly you want to help. You actually might even give yourself a little gold star for making this happen. And then after a while, your loved one comes out and you stand up with your purse and you think, okay, what's next? Do I go in with them to discuss the results? But no, you don't get to discuss the results with the practitioner. and your loved one walks out and you walk to the car with them in silence and you're thinking, okay, what do I say? I want to know everything. I want to know every detail. I want to know every word that was uttered. And then you get in the car and you break the ice and you finally say, so how did it go? And you don't want to appear too eager, but you also can't help it either. And they say, oh, I don't have anything. I'm absolutely fine. He says, I have nothing to worry about. And you are heartbroken. You are shocked and you are angry because WTF. Does he want to come in to our life and stay in our home for a week and then tell me there's no problems? And then what happens is that you start to doubt yourself. You start to think, oh my gosh, is this doctor, healthcare provider, whatever you want to call him, right? Wait, has my loved one been right all the time? Is it me? Do I have the issues? Am I overreacting? Was me yelling at them really the reason that caused them to drink? Have I been unsupportive? What's going on? Oh my gosh, maybe I'm just unfun. Maybe this is normal. Maybe I'm the one with the problem. And so you go into spinning out, right? Okay, well, before that happens to you, and what I just described to you, and the reason why I can describe it so well is because it happened to me, is because these screenings rely on one thing to be effective. One. You want to know what it is? I know you're so smart. You've already guessed it. Honesty. Honesty. Which is the antithesis of addiction. Like addiction doesn't survive without lies. Honesty. In order to really get screened for a potential addiction, your loved one has to be completely honest, cannot leave anything out. They can't sit there and say, okay, well, yeah, I get high this many times per week or per month or whatever, and leave out the part about the drinking, or leave out the part about their investments in the stock market that they used as a way to gamble, and now, they lost X amount of money, or, they have to be honest about all of it. And that is one of the reasons why screenings can be ineffective, because they rely on the opposite behavior of what your loved one has been using and displaying to get away with their addiction. Which brings me back to one of the main things we teach in this community, which is sobriety does not work unless your loved one wants to get better. Because the way these screenings really do work, and they do, is when your loved one is so desperate to get better that their life consequences have been so severe because you are no longer covering up for them. You are no longer preventing consequences. You are allowing life to fall apart for them so that they can see how badly their life has become due to the substance that they are relying on. That is when your loved one goes into the rehab or goes into the hospital or goes to the screening and says, I need help. I am so desperate and out of control. This substance or whatever they're addicted to is killing me, and I have got to get better. That is when people are honest, and not a second before, okay? So, why do screenings work? And let's talk about them a little bit. There's a variety of screenings available. And I'm not going to go into all of them because it's too boring and it doesn't matter. But what I will say is that what I like about screenings is that they provide data that you cannot argue about. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, so there is something called the Audit C. There's another screening called the DAST-10. And I'm just going to give you some sample questions so that you can understand what I'm talking about, okay? Hold on. I said I wasn't going to go into detail, but I don't consider this detail because let me tell you, I have learned about detail today about these screenings. A little too much detail if you ask me. But anyways, okay, I'm looking up these actual screenings because I have them all. So just so you know, really quickly before we go in there, there's two really helpful pieces of data I think you should understand. Now, let's start with the frequency of substance use. Okay, so like how often are they using the substance that they depend on? Some of you are in relationships with people that go, I don't use every week. Like, I don't even use every month. And you're questioning. You're going, wait, this doesn't look like the guy that's on that movie that has to have like a fifth of vodka when he wakes up in the morning. Excuse me. Yeah, that doesn't mean just because your loved one doesn't look like that they don't have a substance use disorder. There's two categories for substance use. One is like the daily or weekly substance use where it's mostly every day that they're having a drink, or maybe they're just having, every other day. That's an indication of substance use disorder. Or there's binge use, which is when they have large quantities in intervals. So that might be very large quantities twice a week, or very, very large quantities on the weekends. But that also indicates that there's a problem. Now you say, well, Michelle, I know lots of people that drink every day, and I wouldn't consider them alcoholics or people with, substance use disorders. And this goes for cannabis too. This goes for anything that you're addicted to. Well, let me break this down. If you are according to, let's see, who is this according to? I put on my readers because I am 44. U.S. guidelines for standard drink sizes. Okay, if you are a woman, then no more than 3 drinks per day or 7 drinks per week. If you are drinking more than, that's a lot. I mean, I don't even remember the last time I drank alcohol. But if you are 7 drinks a week consistently is quite a bit. If you're having more than that, then that's considered abnormal alcoholic use. If you are a man, then it's 14 drinks per week, which is really crazy. Now, if you're over the age of 65, for all you, I think that's senior citizens, right, out there, then it's less than 3 drinks per day or 7 drinks per week. Does that make sense? So the older you get, the less tolerance you have for alcohol. So you go, okay, now, so that's one of the factors they use in screenings is, are they binge drinking, meaning are they having large quantities, or are they drinking every day above the average, the U.S. standards? So that's one data point, right? Now, the other data point they use is, well, what is a drink? Because you guys know we're in love with very creative, crafty people. So they could say, well, yeah, I only have 1 or 2 or 3 drinks a night, but they're filling up like a plastic cup full of whiskey. And you're like, that doesn't constitute a drink. So these doctors, they need exact measurements to be able to not argue about addiction, like what constitutes addiction, which I think is brilliant. So their patients can't go in and say, well, I only really have one drink per day, so that doesn't make me an alcoholic. Well, yeah, it does, because according to a standard drink, if it's beer, it's 12 fluid ounces. So that's one beer. That's one beer bottle. If it's wine, listen to this, it's 5 fluid ounces is one drink. Which, I don't know about you guys, but if you go to a restaurant, I think they serve more than, in most restaurants, they serve more than 5 ounces. So you might be getting a drink and a half if you go out to a restaurant and have one glass of wine. Now, if your loved one has a particular affection for vodka or whiskey or any kind of distilled spirits, that's one drink is 1.5 fluid ounces. It's like a little shot. So using this kind of information helps the healthcare provider and the patient not argue about, well, what's one drink or 2 drinks? That's why it's really, really, I think, really incredible that there's all of this data. The data is in the details. Okay, so like I said, there's a couple screening tools. One is called the Audit C. So if your loved one is going to a healthcare provider, these are the types of questions they're going to ask. I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 examples of each, right? And this is going to help them diagnose whether your loved one really has a problem. Number 1 is, how often do you have a drink containing alcohol? And it's multiple choice. So there's A, never, B, monthly or less, C, 2 to 4 times a month, D, 2 to 3 times a month, or E, 4 or more times a week. I'm sorry, D was 2 to 3 times a week. And then E was 4 or more times a week. So that's one question. Now remember, this relies on honesty. So they can't lie right here, or else it's not effective. The screening is just not going to work. Another question is, how often do you have 6 or more drinks on one occasion? Never, less than monthly, weekly, daily, or almost daily, right? And then another question is, how many standard drinks containing alcohol do you have on a typical day? Never, 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7 through 9, or 10 or more, okay? So that's one sample of one screening. Then there's another screening called the DAST 10, and this is really fascinating. So they have questions, and this is referring to the last 12 months, okay? These are yes or no questions. Number 1, have you ever used drugs other than those required for medical reasons? Yes or no. Do you abuse more than one drug at a time? Yes or no. That could be alcohol and prescription drugs or whatever. Number 3, are you unable to stop using drugs when you want to? Yes or no. Have you ever had blackouts or flashbacks as a result of drug use? Yes or no. Do you ever feel bad or guilty about your drug use? Yes or no. Does your partner or family ever complain about your involvement with drugs? Yes or no. Have you neglected your family because of your drug use? Yes or no. Have you engaged in illegal activities in order to obtain drugs? Have you ever experienced withdrawal symptoms when you stopped taking drugs? And have you ever had medical problems as a result of your drug use? So that is one of the things. Another screening is called the CRAFT, C-R-A-F-T. This is another, I'm not going to go into great detail, but have you ever ridden in a car, driven by someone, including yourself, who was high or had been using alcohol or drugs? Do you ever use alcohol or drugs to relax, feel better about yourself, or fit in? Excuse me. Do you ever use alcohol or drugs when you are alone? Do you ever forget things you did while using alcohol or drugs? Do your family or friends ever tell you that you should cut down on your drinking or drug use? Have you ever gotten into trouble while you were using alcohol or drugs? So, these are all, do you see what I'm talking about with honesty? It does not work if they are not willing to be honest. And they will not be willing to be honest if you're the one spearheading the screening, spearheading the efforts to get sober, right? Okay, so how the heck can you tell what type of, and we talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, what type of stage they are in if you suspect your loved one is like addicted to drugs or alcohol or whatever. Okay, there's a way to do this. It's really interesting. I just learned about it. And I can't, you guys, again, dyslexia. So I have no idea how to even begin to pronounce this. So I'm just going to spell it for you. It's Gedank. So Gedank, N-E-N, experiment. So Gedanken, experiment, and it's all one word. I mean, I don't know. Let's just run with it though, okay? Because thankfully you can understand this without being able to pronounce it. So it says basically it's this really cool experiment, and I've never heard of it before. It's brand new to me. Basically, your loved one goes in to a healthcare provider, and remember, they got to be honest. And they say, listen, I really do think that I am struggling with an addiction to something. And we're going to use, for an example, cannabis, okay? So the patient comes in and goes, I started using when I was 16 years old, like occasionally. I was introduced to it when I went out on the beach and my friends used to get high before we surfed. And I really suffered from anxiety, so I actually really enjoyed the feeling that getting high kind of alleviated my anxiety and made me feel normal. And then I found myself really anticipating surfing just to get high. So then I asked my friend, okay, friend, where do I get this stuff? And my friend, because most of my friends were getting high, introduced me to his supplier. So then I started getting direct access to my marijuana, and I started smoking joints regularly, like weekly, very quickly, because it made me feel relaxed. I loved the feeling. But then I enjoyed getting high so much that I stopped actually surfing. And then I kind of started to just want to hang out by myself. I lost some of my friends. I stopped hanging out with my family members. I actually stopped doing most of the things that I loved doing. And then I just started wanting to watch Netflix, sitting on the couch, eating, getting high all the time. And people started getting annoyed with me because I had a lot of mood swings and I didn't treat people well. I let a lot of people down. I was becoming super lazy. And so then all my friends were like, hey, you know what? Screw you. I'm out of here. I don't want to be around you anymore. It's cool if I want to get high occasionally, but now it's become your entire life and I don't want to be around that. So I lost all my friends. And then I lost motivation to do things. And so here I am sitting in a healthcare provider saying, I need help. The marijuana has just completely taken over my life. And actually, it's taking more from me to get high than it did at the beginning. And I'm starting to feel more and more anxious and even kind of paranoid. And that's really concerning too, because that's what cannabis addiction does. So I'm ready to figure out if I have a problem and what do I need to do about it, right? Now, the person that's actually telling this story to the healthcare provider, most people are secretly hoping that the healthcare provider will tell them, you have a moderate dependence, and after some stages of withdrawal, you probably can use in moderation. Most of your loved ones listening to this right now really secretly want someone to tell them that they're kind of addicted, but not really, and that they can continue to do what they want to do, use a substance that they love and they've come to depend on in moderation, right? So this experiment is a way to see if that's possible, because I have read that some people do have success in moderation, but not a lot. Mostly none of them. So let's just get that out there. Sorry, I had to take a drink. You heard my ice. Okay, so they're sitting in the office and they're saying, okay, well, this is a perfect way to do this using this experiment. First of all, thank you for being honest with me about your story. The most important thing we need to know is how often are you using? This is the question that your loved one will be asked before this experiment. And it's still, this experiment is used very frequently in healthcare providers. So your loved one, who is being very honest, says, I have to get high most of the day. I smoke between 5 to 7 joints a day. It starts when I wake up. I get high probably every 2 to 3 hours. And then I smoke a joint before I go to bed. So those are that's my pattern. And so the healthcare provider says, great, thank you for being honest, and takes note. And then that healthcare provider checks to make sure that whatever they're addicted to and the frequency of their use does not make them at risk for physical withdrawal symptoms. So if your loved one is struggling with like methamphetamines or opioids or benzos or alcohol or any kind of drug to a significant degree where abstinence is going to be an issue, a health issue, like they risk seizures or they just need to be monitored in a hospital setting. That's what they're doing by taking inventory of, okay, what are you addicted to and how frequently are you using it, right? Because some of your loved ones are so addicted that going cold turkey is really, really dangerous. They need to be under a medical advisement. They need to be in a hospital setting with professionals when they decide to get sober. And some of those professionals might encourage just a dip in usage, like not actually going cold turkey, but like medically administering drugs in a decreased dosage over an extended period of time. But for those of you that have people out there that are like, they don't need that, this experiment could work great as long as they are honest. So they say, okay, great. Here's the experiment. You have to abstain from whatever you're addicted to for 4 full weeks. And no, you may not. If it's really going to work, you can't use in moderation. You've really got to abstain. And there's 2 benefits to doing this. One is it actually allows your brain to create new neural pathways to release dopamine. In other words, it's a fancy way of just saying it will help you feel happier and better from abstaining, right? It will heal your brain in a way. The other reason why this will be helpful to abstain entirely is you can actually weigh the pros and cons of getting sober at the end of the 4 weeks. Now, the reason why a lot of practitioners love this is because a lot of times when you go in and you say, I've got a problem, they expect healthcare providers to be like, well, you just need to get sober and abstain forever. You can never touch alcohol. You can never touch drugs. You can never do the things you did before. And that's really intimidating. And a lot of patients are like, well, that's a scary thought. So no, thank you. I think I'll pass and just go run away and continue to do my bad things. But 4 weeks, for those who are motivated, can actually seem attainable. Also, what's really, really important, and this is super helpful, I think, is it is the job of the healthcare provider to make sure that whatever your loved one is sharing is not judged. It has to be a safe, non-judgmental space. And some healthcare providers, I know from personal experience, do a better job of that than others. So they can't be forcing your loved one. They can't to get sober, or they can't be shoving their beliefs down your loved one's throat. They have to, in order to create a space of honesty, and this is actually could be helpful for you guys too. I found that when I was loving and non-judgmental, my ex-husband used to feel way more safe telling me what he's been up to than if I was like coming at him guns a-blazing, going crazy because, he's drunk or used drugs again. Like the kinder and softer I was, allowing in an environment to be honest, the more honest he was willing to be. And so this is the setting that healthcare providers have taken too. They're saying, just listen and have an literally empathetic heart. Meet them where they're at. It's a very common expression in the healthcare world with addiction. So the experiment is 4 weeks of abstinence from whatever it is they're addicted. Now, depending on what your loved one is addicted to, the first 2 weeks are going to be incredibly difficult. They're going to experience side effects depending on what they're, again, addicted to. And I won't go into all of the side effects, but they could be, it's called withdrawal. I'm sure you've heard of that process before. And it can be sweating, nausea, abdominal cramping, headaches, coughing, sore throat, tremors, even seizures, chills, just rapid heart rates, depression, anxiety, what have you. Okay. So yeah, it's not going to be a fun 2 first weeks. It's probably going to stink, and it's going to be really hard for you to watch. And it's going to probably, for a lot of them, say, screw this, I'm going back to what I used to. This isn't worth it, right? But what's happening there, if the healthcare's job is to say up front, this is what's going to happen to you. But because the dopamine that, like when your loved one uses their substance of choice, they are getting a hit of dopamine. That's why they do it. Dopamine is being released in their brain, and dopamine is the happy drug. Dopamine makes you happy. You experience dopamine too, just not by using a substance that you're addicted to. So for you, some of you, it might be like when you're painting, dopamine is released. Some of you might be when you're holding a baby, your dopamine is released. Dopamine is the happy drug, right? It's good. Oh, it's not drug, I'm sorry. But it's a release of neurotransmitters. When you go into withdrawal, you are at a dopamine deficit. Why? Because everything that you've been using to create dopamine is no longer accessible to you because you're practicing abstinence. You're not taking the drug that caused the dopamine release. So if you've relied on alcohol to release dopamine for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, whatever, and you're not drinking alcohol, you're at a dopamine deficit, which is why you have withdrawal symptoms, which is, again, why I've gone into this in other episodes. We call it a dry drunk. That's just a fancy, or it's actually not fancy at all. It's an expression that people use for all of the withdrawal symptoms. You're cranky, you're grumpy, you don't want people to, you're irritated, you're agitated, you're shaky. You're like, leave me the hell alone. And then you guys are like, and us, we're all the sober ones who've been dying for our loved ones to get better because we're like, if they just got sober, we would feel so much better. We look at them getting sober and we're like, what? This is not what I wanted. God, they were easier to be around when they were high. Yes, because they were getting dopamine. And when they're getting sober, they don't have that dopamine. So it's a lack of happiness that makes them grumpy. But if they can get through the 2 weeks of withdrawal symptoms, then they can start to feel better. And at the end of 4 weeks, most likely, they will feel the best they've felt in a very long time. 4 weeks, guys, that's not a long time. Well, it is to somebody, I was thinking about this study and thinking, my God, I should do this with sugar, because the idea of not having sugar for 4 weeks seems like a very long time to me. So anyways, at the end of 4 weeks, your brain, your dopamine, you're not at a deficit anymore. You're actually mellowed out. You're evened out. You're back to a level playing field. Your dopamine levels are back to, your brain has healed, and it's back to sort of normal, like you, where we don't feel happy dopamine hits all the time, every day, consistently, like drugs provide us. So what happens is that then at the end of this 4 weeks, if the patient makes it, then the healthcare practitioner says, okay, great, let's sit down and make a list of pros and cons. Isn't that funny? When I read that, I was like, really? That's simple, huh? Just list of pros and cons? Like, wow, that's interesting. But the reason why they're doing that is to help actually have the person who's addicted to have concrete, substantial pros to the reasons for getting sober. So they make this list together and I say, oh, well, my relationship's improved. My energy is improved. I'm not suffering from insomnia anymore. These are real concrete benefits to not using. There are also cons, though. And most of the cons include I was bored, or I've lost friends, I can't do the same activities as I used to do. And the healthcare practitioner's job is to sit there and go, really empathize and sympathize with the cons of getting sober. Not to like brush them under the rug and go, oh, well, those people are, schmoes anyways. You don't want to hang out with them. I'm sorry if schmoes is a really bad word. Actually, I think I just made it up. I don't know, but I apologize. Dodos, right? Whatever. So, you want to be a realistic practitioner and you want to be empathetic. You don't want to sweep anything under the rug. And then what happens is you as a practitioner try to help coerce them into a life like saying, hey, do you want to do another month? Let's try another month. You were successful these 4 weeks. Let's do another 4 weeks. I believe in you. I think you can do it. But most likely, the patient who is suffering from substance use says, I can't do that. In fact, I'm not going to do that. And I'd rather just do moderation. Let's try moderation, right? And so then what happens is the practitioner says, a good practitioner, a well-trained practitioner is not supposed to say, no. Moderation is not acceptable. It's all or nothing. You're out of here. If you can't commit to sobriety, you're gone. A good healthcare practitioner is supposed to work with their patient because they want their patient to continue coming back to the clinic. They want their patient to continue to have a good relationship, to establish honesty. And you cannot do that if you are forcing your beliefs on your patient. So they are trained to say, okay, all right. I'm not disappointed in you. Let's work with this whole moderation theory. Let's try it. All right, I'll meet you where you're at. But let's ask some questions about this whole moderation situation, okay? Like some questions are, when are you going to use the substance? Like, what days of the week? And then, will you only be using substances on the weekend or during the week too? A practitioner will want to, wait, before I get there, hold on. Another question would be, do you plan on using substances with friends? Or do you think that you will use them alone? What is a practitioner doing right now? I love this. I loved when I read this because I recognized it right away. And I know you guys have too. The practitioner is establishing boundaries. It's establishing boundaries of moderation. It's saying, all right, here's the rules that you are going to establish, not me. I'm the healthcare practitioner, but you have autonomy over your sobriety. You are going to dictate what you think you can and will be able to do. And this is key to sobriety, because it cannot be another person's forced will or agenda if it wants to stick. It has to have the person suffering from substance use has to feel like they are driving their own car of sobriety. It cannot be you driving the car with them in the back seat going, okay, take me wherever you want me to go. They have to be in charge of their own destination. Where do they go? How do they get there? What does this look like? They have to be in the driver's seat if you want them to succeed. So the practitioner is saying, all right, let's go with moderation, but let's go with rules and let's go with boundaries. And then let's try it for 2 weeks and come back to me. Tell me what you got. Tell me how it works. And if that practitioner has been provided a safe, non-judgmental environment, and the loved one is still as desperate to get better as they were at the beginning, they will be honest with how that went. How did the moderation go? Now, like I said before, there has been some studies done that show a very minimal amount of people are able to use moderation long term. But more than likely, the moderation starts off well-intended, and then it goes out of control. The boundaries are not respected by the person struggling with substance use disorder. They crave the dopamine hits more. And then the brain cannot fully recover. And so it continues with remember we talked about this in the last podcast, the disease model brain, which is basically a way of saying a damaged pathways in the brain that are caused by continuing addiction, right? So this method is a great, why am I going into detail? How the heck can this help you? Well, number one, it's a great way to think back to a time where you were in love with your one who suffers from substance use, and think back and go, have they ever been sober for 4 weeks straight? Okay, and what happened? Or ask yourself, have they ever my gosh, you guys, I just lost my train of thought. I was doing so good. I made it through the whole podcast without losing my train of thought. Oh, got it. Have they ever, what does that, why does that happen? Why does it just come and go? Please. Oh, have they ever not agreed to use on weekends only, but then, used during the week? Or have they ever agreed to not using one substance, but then transferred their addiction to another substance? These are all great questions to ask yourself. And I keep forgetting to mention, and I apologize, but I know that this information, particularly the last couple episodes, are super heavy. So I have made worksheets. Actually, I can take no credit. I did not make them. Lori made them. Lori works full-time for us, and she is amazing. And she is here to help you. And whenever you email us, she's the one who always responds lovingly. Lori and Brittany, who also works for us full-time as a CEO, they have together made worksheets for you that go over what I'm talking about. And they're completely free. All you have to do is go to the website, loveoveraddiction.com, enter your email address, and not only will you get this week's episode with all of the notes, we provide a transcription of the podcast for you. So if you want to read, if you want to highlight, if you want to make notes, or if you just want to save it to an app on your phone because you don't trust your loved one and you think they get mad if they see any kind of literature about addiction laying around the house, you can save it to your apps. But you'll get this episode and you have access to all the other previous episodes. You don't have to keep entering your email every time. So that's free for you guys. I want you all to get the help that you deserve, your help, your help, not your loved ones, your help that you deserve and that you need, regardless of your income, regardless of what you can afford. And on that note, I also want to say, if you want to go in deeper with me and you want to get better, we have programs. Now, if you say, Michelle, I've checked out your programs and I can't afford them, I'm here to lovingly tell you that we offer them for free for people. So everyone who buys one, we give one away absolutely for free. I don't want anyone who really genuinely wants help to be denied because they can't afford it. That's not at all. That never sat right with me. So please email us if you're interested and you can't afford one of the programs. I, again, am now almost 44 in August. And I'm going to say I am proud of these programs. I really am. And I'm not one to boast. I promise I'm not. But these programs are so well researched and they're entertaining and they're full of stories. And all you have to do is listen maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day. Some of you like to go hard and fast on these, but whatever your style of learning is, you can have guidebooks, which are beautifully printed out lessons and questions and prompts. And you can read the program if you don't like listening to it. A lot of people say the guidebooks are so pretty they don't want to write in them. But whatever you want, I just want to make sure that no matter how much we go into things like the screening process or ways to tell your loved one is, going to get sober or not, that's all important. It's helpful. But most important is you. Most important is taking care of you, of making sure that you feel well cared for, that you feel loved, that you feel like somebody is here for you, that someone understands what you're going through, and that many, many, many thousands of people have come out the other side of this situation, feeling so much better about themselves and their lives, whether they decided to leave or stay. Makes no difference. It's all about getting you back to a place of healthy. Because if we're all honest with each other, loving someone with addiction turns us into people that aren't that healthy. It's a really damaging disease. That's why they call it a family disease, because it affects everyone involved, right? And so we want to just make sure that you are living your best life, whatever that looks like for you, because it's not one size fits all. There's not one formula that works for everyone. Instead, you learn, you listen, you take what you think is helpful for you, and you disregard the rest, right? It's not about perfectionism. It's not about nailing it. It's not about hustling or whatever, working hard till you kill yourself. I hate that stuff. It's just about going slow and steady and practicing a lot of love for yourself, a lot of patience for yourself, so much grace and understanding, and doing sometimes the best you can and sometimes so-so. And just knowing that every day you're doing a little bit. That's good enough. That's good enough. It's actually the best. That way you don't burn out. Okay? So those resources are available to you all the time. And what I love about this podcast and the programs is that, because I don't do workshops and I don't do any of the other stuff. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in growing this community too big. I like to keep it small and intimate. I like just talking to you. I don't bring on guests or anything else. It's just you and me. But I want to be available to you 24 hours a day. And I am when you have the podcast or through the program. Like, you have crises, particularly with addiction, like I used to, at all hours of the evening and morning. It's not a 9 to 5 thing. And it's particularly heavy around holidays, right? And evenings and weekends. So that's it for today. I know it's a lot. I'm so proud of you if you made it to the end of this podcast, because I don't blame you if you were tempted to turn it off midway. It's heavy, right? It's heavy. It's hard. But I'm grateful that you're trusting me to help you through this. I take that so seriously, and I'm so excited to do it, to do this work for you and report back. It's my favorite thing to do. All right. So, love you guys. Super long episode. Might be the longest one we've done. But I'm glad if you found one or two things to help you out. I'll talk to you next week. This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with my personal thoughts and beliefs. We are bonded together by the fact that we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.